The pause lasted exactly 4 seconds. Judge Catherine Walsh watched the security guard's face, watched him open his mouth, close it, look down at his hands. Mr. Hayes, I'll ask again. Did you see the defendant strike the victim? Preston Hayes sat in the witness box wearing his Sentinel security uniform, navy blue, name badge reflecting the courtroom lights. His hands gripped the wooden rail in front of him hard enough that his knuckles had gone pale. He stopped. Started over. Your Honor, I need to be very clear about what I saw. The prosecutor, Martin Chen, leaned forward. His entire case depended on this testimony. Armed robbery, aggravated assault. The defendant, a 22-year-old named Carlos Mendez, faced a sentence of 15 to 25 years. Preston's testimony was the cornerstone. The only witness to the actual assault? His police statement had been clear, definitive. Now, under oath, something had changed. Judge Walsh studied him. 26 years on the bench taught you to read hesitation. This wasn't evasion. This was conscience fighting against consequence. Take your time, Mr. Hayes. Tell the court exactly what you saw. Preston took a breath. What he said next would destroy someone's life. The question was whose? Preston Hayes had worked in security for 7 years. Started at 19, night shift at a warehouse, minimum wage plus a uniform that didn't quite fit. Worked his way up through 3 companies before landing at Sentinel Security, corporate security, office buildings, retail complexes, the kind of work that requires CPR certification and conflict de-escalation training. Professional development courses are offered every 6 months. Performance reviews that actually mattered. Preston was good at his job, patient, observant, the kind of guard who learned names. Who knew which executive liked their coffee from the third-floor machine versus the lobby? Who noticed when the cleaning crew had a new member and made sure they had building access credentials? He'd been assigned to the Riverside Commerce Plaza for 3 years. 23-story building, mixed retail on the ground floor, professional offices above. His shift ran from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., peak hours. Maximum foot traffic. The incident happened on a Tuesday evening, 7:47 p.m. Preston had been doing his hourly patrol of the ground floor retail corridor. That's when he heard the commotion. A jewelry store. Prestige gems, high-end pieces, security glass, buzz-in entry system. The owner, David Friedman, was 64, third-generation jeweler. Preston knew him well enough to know the man kept a baseball bat under the counter and pepper spray in his desk drawer. When Preston reached the store, David was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose. A young Latino man stood over him. The display case was shattered, velvet trays scattered. Approximately $40,000 in merchandise was exposed. Preston made a split-second assessment, reached for his radio, called the police. The young man ran. Preston gave chase, caught him 2 blocks away, held him until the police arrived, gave a clear statement, identified the suspect, described the assault. Everything the prosecution needed. That was 6 months ago. Now, sitting in court, Preston couldn't stop seeing the thing he'd noticed, the thing he'd ignored at the time, the thing that had been bothering him for months. The prosecutor tried again. Mr. Hayes, your police statement was very clear. You stated, and I quote, I observed the defendant standing over Mr. Friedman with a raised fist. Mr. Friedman was on the ground, bleeding. The defendant appeared to have just struck him. Is that statement accurate? Preston's jaw tightened. That's what I said, yes. And was it true? It was what I believed I saw in that moment. Martin Chen's expression shifted slightly. Warning signs. Mr. Hayes, are you changing your testimony? I'm clarifying it. You're under oath. Perjury carries serious consequences, Judge Walsh intervened. Mr. Chen, the witness is aware of his obligations. Mr. Hayes, please explain what you mean by clarifying. Preston looked at Carlos Mendez. The young man sat beside his public defender, a tired-looking woman named Sandra Ortiz. Carlos's eyes were red. He'd been in the county lockup for 6 months. Couldn't make bail. Lost his job, his apartment, everything. Preston had looked into him. Wasn't supposed to. Did it anyway. Carlos worked 2 jobs. Community college student, no criminal record. Lived with his grandmother. Sent money to family members back in his home country in Latin America. None of that proved innocence. But it created doubt. And the thing Preston had noticed created more than doubt. When I arrived at the scene, Preston said carefully, Mr. Friedman was on the ground. Carlos, the defendant, was standing near him. There was broken glass everywhere, blood on Mr. Friedman's face, and Carlos looked panicked. Panicked because he'd just committed armed robbery, Martin suggested. Maybe. Or panicked for another reason. What other reason could there be? Preston met the prosecutor's eyes. Because he'd just witnessed something terrible and didn't know how to help. The courtroom erupted. Judge Walsh gavelled for silence. Martin Chen was on his feet. Your Honor, the witness is speculating wildly. His original statement was made in the immediate aftermath, Preston interrupted. I gave chase. I caught him. I was full of adrenaline. I made assumptions based on what I thought I saw. You saw my client standing over a bleeding man with thousands of dollars in exposed merchandise. Martin shot back. I saw a young man near a bleeding elderly man, Preston corrected. I assumed the worst because that's what I'm trained to do. Assume threat. Respond to threat. Neutralize threat. Sandra Ortiz stood. Your Honor, may I ask the witness some questions? Judge Walsh nodded. Proceed. Sandra approached the witness stand. Mr. Hayes, you mentioned something you noticed. What was it? Preston had been carrying this for 6 months. The weight of it. The uncertainty. The fear that saying it out loud would make him look incompetent or biased or worse. Mr. Friedman's hands, he said quietly. What about them? When the paramedics arrived, I helped them assess him. His hands were covered in blood. But his knuckles, his right-hand knuckles were split, swollen. The kind of injury you get from punching something. Or someone. The courtroom went silent. Why didn't you include this in your statement? Sandra asked. Because I told myself it didn't matter. He'd been assaulted. Maybe he'd tried to defend himself. Maybe he'd hit the display case when he fell. I had a suspect in custody who matched the scene. I didn't want to complicate things. Complicate things how? Preston's voice dropped. I'm a black security guard. The suspect is Latino. The victim is a white business owner. I know how these narratives work. If I started questioning the obvious story, people would assume I was protecting Carlos because we're both minorities, or that I was incompetent or biased. So I kept it simple. I gave the statement everyone expected. Have you ever stayed silent because telling the truth felt too complicated? Comment below if you've experienced this. I want to hear your stories. Sandra pulled out a photo. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit 12. Photo of David Friedman's hands taken by paramedics at the scene. The photo went up on the courtroom monitor. Clear image. Right hand. Knuckles are split and swollen. Classic defensive injury. Or an offensive injury. Martin was flipping through his files frantically. This wasn't disclosed in discovery. Because you had the photo and never looked at it, Sandra said coldly. It's been in the evidence file for 6 months. You just never questioned your narrative. Judge Walsh studied the photo. Mr. Hayes, you're saying you believe Mr. Friedman may have thrown the first punch. I'm saying I don't know who hit who first. I arrived after the altercation. I made assumptions. And I've spent 6 months wondering if I helped put an innocent man in jail. Carlos was crying now. Quiet. Shoulders shaking. His grandmother in the gallery had both hands over her mouth. There's something else, Preston added. The CCTV. Sandra turned sharply. What CCTV? Riverside Commerce Plaza has cameras everywhere. 17 cameras on the ground floor alone. Multiple angles. I was so focused on the store's internal camera, which mysteriously malfunctioned that day, that I never thought about the plaza's external system. Martin was pale now. The plaza's system was checked. No useful footage. The primary system was checked, Preston corrected. But there's a backup system. Older cameras. Lower resolution. They feed to a separate server. Most people don't even know they exist. I only know because I helped at troubleshoot one last year. Sandra looked at Judge Walsh. Your Honor, I move for an immediate continuance to retrieve and review this footage. Your Honor, this is a desperate stalling tactic, Martin argued. The witness is speculating about cameras that may not even... They exist, Preston said firmly. Camera B7, mounted above the main corridor entrance, overlooks the jewelry store entrance at an angle. Lower resolution, but functional. The feeds are saved for 90 days before overwriting. We're at month 6. The footage is gone by now, but the plaza's IT director keeps quarterly backup archives. Judge Walsh made a decision. Court is in recess. I want that footage retrieved and reviewed. We reconvene in 48 hours. Preston sat in his car in the courthouse parking lot. His hands shook. His career was probably over. Sentinel Security valued reliability, consistency, guards who made the job simple. Preston had just complicated everything. His phone buzzed. Text from his supervisor. "Call me, now." He didn't call. Drove home instead. Small apartment in a neighborhood where security guards could afford rent. He'd lived there for 4 years. Saved money. Hoped eventually to buy something. Maybe go back to school. Maybe build something beyond night shifts and incident reports. That all felt distant now, uncertain. His phone rang. His mother. He answered. "Baby, I just saw the news. They're saying you changed your testimony, said you might have sent an innocent boy to jail." Her voice carried worry and pride in equal measure. "Tell me you did the right thing. I told the truth, Mama. Finally." Finally? I should have said something 6 months ago. Should have questioned it then. But I was scared. Scared of looking incompetent. Scared people would think I was protecting him because we're both minorities. Scared of all the ways telling a complicated truth could destroy me. And now? Now, I'm more scared of the ways staying silent was destroying me anyway. His mother was quiet for a moment. "Your daddy would be proud." "You know that." Preston's father had been a cop, 23 years on the force. Died in a car accident when Preston was 16. He taught Preston about integrity, about the weight of the badge, about how authority came with responsibility to the truth, not convenience. Preston had chosen security work instead of police work, told himself it was different, safer, less morally complicated. But here he was anyway, facing the same questions. Truth versus comfort. Justice versus career. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to choose between your job and your conscience? Drop a comment. I hope you're right, Mama. I am. Now you go make sure that footage says what you think it says. Because if you're wrong, I know. I've destroyed 2 lives for nothing. The IT director at Riverside Commerce Plaza was a man named Vincent Cross, 47. 20 years of managing the building's technology infrastructure. He looked exhausted when Preston and Sandra Ortiz arrived at his office. "The quarterly backups are stored off-site," Vincent explained. "Cloud server. We keep them for compliance purposes. Insurance liability. I pulled the file you mentioned. Camera B7, quarter 2. The week of the incident." He pulled up the footage on his monitor. Lower resolution, like you said. 15 frames per second instead of 30. But it's there! The timestamp showed 7:46 p.m., 1 minute before Preston arrived. The camera angle was oblique, caught the jewelry store entrance from about 40 feet away. Figure resolution was poor. Could tell someone was moving, but the facial features were indistinct. "There," Vincent pointed. "That's your time frame." They watched. A figure approached the store, appeared to be examining the window display. That was Carlos. His public defender had established he'd been walking home from his shift at a restaurant 2 blocks away. He'd stopped to look at a necklace he wanted to buy for his grandmother's birthday. The store door opened. David Friedman stepped out, appeared to be speaking. Carlos turned toward him, stepped back, hands up in a placating gesture. David moved forward, aggressive body language, pointing. Carlos backed up further, shaking his head. Then David grabbed Carlos's jacket, pulled him forward. Carlos tried to pull away. David's right arm came up. Forward motion. A punch. Carlos stumbled backward into the store's window display. His elbow hit the glass, shattered it. David grabbed Carlos again. Carlos pushed him away. Defensive motion. David fell, hit his head on the door frame on the way down. Carlos stood there, frozen, panicked, exactly like Preston had described. Then Preston himself appeared in frame, running toward them. The whole thing took 47 seconds. The courtroom, 48 hours later, was packed. News crews in the hall. Carlos's family filled 2 rows. Preston sat in the gallery. He'd been told he might need to testify again. Might face cross-examination. Might face perjury questions for his original statement. Judge Walsh took the bench. "We're here to review footage from camera B7 at Riverside Commerce Plaza. I've watched it 3 times. I'll play it once for the court." The monitor lit up. 47 seconds of grainy footage, but crystal clear in what it showed. David Friedman is assaulting Carlos Mendez. Carlos is defending himself. Accidental property damage. David fell and hit his head. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Martin Chen stood. "Your Honor, In light of this new evidence, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Carlos Mendez. So moved, Judge Walsh turned to Carlos. Mr. Mendez, you're free to go. I apologize on behalf of this court for the 6 months you've spent incarcerated for a crime you didn't commit. Carlos collapsed into Sandra's arms, sobbing. His grandmother rushed forward. The family surrounded him. Judge Walsh wasn't finished. However, this case raises serious concerns. Mr. Friedman filed a false police report, allowed an innocent man to be prosecuted. Mr. Chen, I expect charges to be filed against Mr. Friedman within the week. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Hayes. She looked at Preston. Stand, please. Preston stood, stomach dropping. Here it came. Perjury charges, obstruction, career destruction. Have you ever watched someone's fate hang in the balance? Share your experience below. You displayed remarkable moral courage in correcting your initial statement. You recognized your own bias and assumptions. You pursued truth despite personal cost. That's what we need more of in this system. She paused. The court commends you. Thank you. Preston felt his knees weaken. Relief and exhaustion washed over him in equal measure. But it wasn't over. Martin Chen was standing again, looking at his notes. His face had gone pale. Your Honor, there's something else. David Friedman owns Prestige Gems. I just received a call from the insurance investigator. They've been reviewing his claims history. In the past 3 years, he's filed 7 insurance claims for theft or damage. Total payout, $340,000. Each time, security footage either malfunctioned or showed convenient blind spots. The investigation into David Friedman expanded rapidly. Insurance fraud, multiple false police reports, a pattern spanning 3 years and 7 incidents. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Stage a theft or assault. Ensure security footage was unavailable or ambiguous. File a police report blaming a convenient suspect, usually young, usually minority. File an insurance claim. Collect payout. The jewelry was never stolen, just moved to secondary inventory or sold privately. Carlos had been unlucky. Wrong place, wrong appearance, wrong assumptions by everyone involved. Friedman was arrested within 72 hours, charged with insurance fraud, filing false police reports, assault, and battery. The evidence was overwhelming. He eventually pleaded guilty to avoid trial, sentenced to 4 years in prison, ordered to pay $340,000 in restitution plus penalties. Carlos sued the city for wrongful prosecution. The case settled for an undisclosed amount reported to be in the mid-6 figures, enough to finish his degree, help his grandmother, start over. Preston faced review by Sentinel Security. His supervisor called him in. Preston expected termination. Instead, I got a promotion, head of training. His job now was teaching other guards about assumptions, bias, and the importance of questioning convenient narratives. You made us look bad initially, his supervisor admitted, but you made us look worse if we punished you for telling the truth. We need more people willing to correct mistakes, not fewer. The story went national. Preston was interviewed by 3 major networks. He declined most requests, gave one interview to a local station where he said simply, I made assumptions based on appearance and circumstance. I let those assumptions delay justice for 6 months. I'm grateful the truth came out. I'm sorry it took so long. Carlos and Preston met privately 2 weeks after the case ended. Carlos hugged him. You could have stayed silent, protected yourself. Instead, you risked everything. I almost stayed silent, Preston admitted. I was terrified. What changed? I kept thinking about you in that cell. 6 months. For defending yourself against assault. Because I was too afraid to question the obvious story. He shook his head. Fear of looking bad seemed small compared to that. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to correct a mistake that cost you something? Here is what Preston Hayes' story teaches us. First, institutional assumptions are more dangerous than individual prejudice. Preston wasn't consciously racist, but he operated within systems that assume certain narratives. Young Latino man, elderly white victim, broken glass, blood. The story wrote itself. No one questioned it because it fit expected patterns. Institutions run on these patterns. They become invisible until someone forces us to see them. Second, correcting mistakes requires more courage than avoiding them. Preston could have stayed silent, let the case proceed, protected his career. Instead, he risked everything to tell a more complete truth. We punish people for changing testimony, for appearing inconsistent, for complicating simple narratives. But the truth is often complicated. We need systems that reward correction, not punish it. Third, convenient evidence gets scrutinized less than inconvenient evidence. The primary security footage malfunctioned. No one questioned it, because the narrative worked without it. Preston's statement was enough. But if Preston had said, "I think the victim attacked first," every detail would have been examined. We investigate what contradicts our assumptions, accept what confirms them. Fourth, backup systems exist because primary systems fail. Camera B7 was old, low resolution, rarely checked, but it captured the truth. Organizations need redundancy, not just for efficiency, but for accountability. The footage everyone forgot about became the evidence that mattered most. Fifth, moral courage is expensive, but silence is more expensive. Preston risked his career by telling the truth, but staying silent was destroying him. 6 months of doubt. 6 months knowing he might have helped imprison an innocent man. The psychological cost of silence exceeds the professional cost of truth. Not immediately, but inevitably. Sixth, insurance fraud thrives on racial assumptions. Friedman's scheme worked 7 times because each time he had a convenient suspect. Someone whose appearance made the story believable. Someone whose word would be questioned while his was accepted. He weaponized racial bias for profit. That's not unusual. That's how systemic bias functions. If you're in a position of authority, security, police, management, anywhere your word carries weight, understand that your assumptions have consequences. Question convenient narratives. Look for missing evidence. Ask uncomfortable questions. The person whose life depends on your accuracy is counting on you to see past the obvious story. If you witness something ambiguous, resist the urge to fill in gaps with assumptions. He must have, and probably, and it looked like, are dangerous foundations for testimony. Admit uncertainty. Acknowledge limitations. Say, "I don't know," when you don't know. If you made a mistake, correct it. Yes, it's costly. Yes, people will question your credibility. But living with the unjust consequences of your error costs more. Preston lost sleep for 6 months. Imagine losing it for 6 years. Or forever. The truth doesn't care about convenience. It exists whether we acknowledge it or not. Whether it fits our assumptions or not. Whether it's comfortable or not. Preston Hayes chose truth over comfort. Correction over career protection. And in doing so, he freed an innocent man and exposed a systematic fraud. 47 seconds of footage. 6 months of injustice. One person's courage to say, "I was wrong." Sometimes being right means admitting you were wrong. Sometimes justice requires questioning yourself more harshly than you question others. And sometimes the backup camera no one remembers becomes the witness everyone needs.